Hello, world. Last time for the podcast monitor app, we fixed up the data that's being returned from the parser. So now, right before we can tie everything together, we need to do one last kind of fix up, and that's basically how we're passing the data around. Um, so we kind of look at this. We we have the feed metadata that we're going to be passing in, and we have um, the feed itself that's getting passed out, and the feed itself contains the metadata, right? So we definitely need to pass the metadata in so that it can all be passed back out of the feed parser. Now, one interesting thing with that, right, is okay, so if we pass in the metadata contains the URL, the name, and the type. And so if we pass it in, and the other thing just of note is then we can do validations of the things we parse if we wanted to. But so we pass in the URL. So the URL is going to be needed by the requester. So if we look at the RssRequester here, we pass the URL in on construction, which means that for the test one, if we want to pass a test URL, and this is what we're talking about, where we would either have to substitute the requester or we would have to check the URL in the requester against the URL in the metadata to confirm we're basically calling for the right one. And that's not something we want to do. So if we're passing in the metadata in here, we want the feed parser itself to send the metadata to the requester. And so what we're actually going to do is we're going to, instead of passing on the constructor, it's going to take a requester and it's going to pass the URL in this get data method and then return that for it. So we're basically going to remove this kind of init method here. And then we're going to actually do the same thing for the parser because we want to be able to, we're going to pass in the parser as well. And so when we do that, instead of passing in the data here and doing this tree portion here, we're going to just pass it in on the parse method, which is probably a better just overall construct anyway. And then in here we can pass in those classes, and the feed parser will change this to get feed, and it'll take metadata in there and then pass back the feed from the feed metadata. So those are kind of all the quick changes we're going to make. We're going to do it from like a test first perspective, essentially. So let's get started, and we're going to start with the parser. So let's open up the parser, the unit test. Oh, actually, no, we're not going to start with the parser. We're going to start with the requester. So close these out. Okay, so let's open the requester, the stub. Okay, so basically what we're going to what we want to do here is first, let's run the unit test, ensure everything is working for the functional tests. All right, so everything's working fine here with the requester. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this requester here, since we're not passing, so we don't want to pass the URL in here, we actually want to pass it in here. And then what we're going to do is we are going to move this into the setup because this doesn't change for any of them. So if we set up a requester and then we call a bunch of get data methods with a URL on it. So basically, let's just quickly update these. We only have the 3 methods, and these actually don't need a try. And then we can remove these 2 as well as these 2. Oh, well, okay. And then, so I should have just done it separately for these ones, but that's fine. Okay, so now that's basically what we want for the tests. right? So we're moving the requester up here, and then we're getting rid of the constructor call in the test, and passing the URL to the getData method. So let's commit that real fast. Updated requester FTs. To pass the URL into getData versus constructor. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna just make note that this is broken as well. So now if we run the tests, they'll fail because we have all the arguments incorrect. So now let's go in here. Actually, we don't need this method at all. It's just one single method. URL. Let's run it again. And everything passed. All right, so that's it. And then the other thing is with this one here, because we aren't using, right, so normally we would have an interface and this would both go off that interface, and that's generally just a better thing to do. We might add it in the future and add a kind of a verification for it and stuff, but at least for now it doesn't matter. But because they don't, right, that would be where we want to change the, actually, you know what? Let's do that. So I'm gonna go add a new file, RSS, because then we can in the feed parser we can verify that it is of this type that we're always using. Interface.py, and this is just going to be class RssRequester interface and def getData self URL raise a not implemented error. And then we're going to come in here, and so we're going to import RssRequester interface from import RssRequester interface there. Right, and so just what this allows us to do, so let's say we did this. I guess it doesn't actually do completion on it. But then we're also going to come in here and say from RssRequester interface import that. Okay, so if I run the test, everything should still be fine. Now the interesting thing will be in the parser unit test. So in the parser unit test, right, we are adding the stub into here, and we're calling it with this. And that's fine because we haven't actually updated this yet. Yeah, see, this is why I guess the interface it's not like a strongly typed thing like if you're using other languages, but we'll just keep it in there. So we can remove this, and then this will take a URL which you're not going to use, and then we're just going to still return that. Okay, and then so I'm going to come through, clean up a few things. Interface, string, string, string. Okay, so that passes fine, but now we also have the Python RssParser unit test, which are not failed because of the stub is now messed up. But first, so we'll come in here and we'll say git add, git commit, broken, and we'll say here fixed requester stub and added shared interface. Cool. Okay. So now we need to correct the parser, right? And so similarly here, so this is the only one that we use it in. So this one here doesn't take that, takes it down here. And so now let's run that unit test again. And it passes. And so we'll just go git commit, fixed RSS, fixed stub in parser UT. Okay, so that's that one down. Now we want to do a similar thing. Alright, I didn't save that. That's fine. Git commit. All it is the noted arg type in. That's fine. I don't feel like going back and cleaning that up any more than that. All right, so we have the stub here. Get rid of that. Okay, so the other thing we need to do, we're going to leave the parser open. Close the requester, the functional test. Okay, and now the parser itself. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing with the parser. So here we have the parser take the data, and then we call the parse. And so we're going to switch that, move that down there, come in here, say self.parser, say self.parser. And take this line here, get rid of these two, and then same thing, and this one's cleaner to update. And we'll get rid of these. And then we'll run the parser UTs, 6 errors. And then we'll say, so git commit am git commit am broken updated parser UTs to pass data into parse method verse constructor. All right, so now we need to do the same thing coming here. Okay, so now instead of passing this into here, we're no longer going to do that. And so we won't be able to do any of this. So we'll just have these variables that we're using, which could really be class variables, and the setup of the parsed value. So we're going to add this down here. This is going to be data string. So this now gets set up fine. And then the other thing we'll want to do, so here, if we're passing the data in, right, and this is coming in here, so then we go, let's say, parse channel info. And so we do that, and we're getting this stuff, and we're going parse info, and then for the key value, save a value, and we're just updating the dictionary. So we actually don't want this here. We actually want to do that as well inside this parsed method. So we're actually going to come up here, do this, and then we're just going to say here, if not data, return to parsed value. And the other thing I could do is I could say if data. I think that's a little cleaner. I like that. So we create the dictionary, if the data, we make the tree, and then we do everything that we're doing with the tree and stuff. And then this gets reset every time. Now, the one thing, right, is if we didn't do this, it wouldn't cause an issue in the unit tests because we're actually in the setup. The setup gets run each time. So it actually would it actually wouldn't have an issue because it creates a new one each time. But if we actually use it, then it would have an issue because it would persist. So right, we could add a test for that, like, oh, if you call it twice, right? So here, I will do that because that I think is a good kind of case. The other one doesn't really save anything, so it's fine. So let's run the parser unit tests. All right, everything passes. So we'll say git commit. Fixed parser UTs. Or we'll say updated parser UTs. Or updated parser to accept data in parse method. Okay, and so the last thing I do, I'm going to create another test. So I'm going to say def test multiple parses. And so we'll add all this in here. And so we'll basically do this twice. So we'll come in, we'll do that, and then we'll do it again, except now let's update this, and let's just use another. Let's go to this feeds here, and let's take this, come over to the second monitor, come up here, and grab that. Switch back over, and so just indent this properly. And basically this, interestingly, this uses that ampersand, and this one uses the just an ampersand. Okay, and those actually don't change. Well, that's fine as long as this is different. I guess what we should do, because it could. So I guess let's remove the copyright. Actually, let's just remove both of them. So it would contain this, and technically it would override this in this dictionary, but this other information is not here, so if it's deleting it, that means we're starting with the fresh one. So let's run this now. Now we get an error, not well formed. And this is line 86, line 63. So in here, parsing this data, it's saying this isn't well formed. Is it because of the ampersand? It is. Okay, so that's interesting. So that means the actual data is problematic there. So we're going to end up running into an issue where we'll need to account for that essentially. So when we read in, well, I don't know. No, actually, I guess when we read it in, it might return it as it should. So let's not worry about that right now. But now the test passes, so we're good. Okay, and so let's say git commit am added RssParser test multiple parsers. Cool. Okay, so now we can close out all of this stuff, and now we are back to here. So now that all the data gets passed through, right, if we're looking at the interface or the requester itself, there's nothing we do with the constructor. For this one, constructor is also empty. In fact, we could get rid of the constructor of that if we wanted to, but we're not going to. So now, basically in here, passing in episode, feed metadata, and now let's also pass in from RssParser, import RssParser, from RssRequester stub, import stub RssRequester. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say I guess I think I'm going to do it. So I guess we'll just call it a requester equals RssRequest or stub RssRequester, parser equals RssParser there, and then this, we're going to change this method to parser dot get feed, and we're going to pass it the metadata there. Okay. And that's what this test is now going to look like. Updated feed parser UT be correct, requires FP implementation. All right, so now, all right, so this is going to come over here. So we're looking at this here. So now we need to RssRequester interface import RssRequester interface from RssRequester for requester, and then from RssParser import RssParser. And this here, so we're going to use basically what the star does is it makes it more difficult. I mean, it has to be set using a key, a named variable. So it has to be, in what order? Oh, no, I guess it's right there. Requester right. So basically, these have to be set using a named variable. And this will be interface. And this will be parser. Statements must be separated by new lines or semicolons. This is supposed to be this one? I think, okay, that looks like the proper syntax, I guess. And then here, this is going to take, and so the other thing we need is from feed metadata, import feed metadata. And here, we're going to have self, and then we're going to have metadata, feed metadata. So basically what this does is it requires us to set it this way. We couldn't call it like this. So you have to kind of like know, it's kind of a know what you're doing type of thing to set it. So that's, and then this is going to return, and then I guess the other thing, from feed, import feed. This is going to return feed. All right, so now if we run it, if we run Python feed parser unit test, this is throwing an error in the validate, can't compare offset naive and offset aware data type. So it looks like there's also an error in, is it the episode? In here. And so this here, so it looks like we need to come in here and do so it looks like we're going to need to make an adjustment to this as well. So let's come into this, and we set it so TZ info. Alright, so we'll come in here and then we'll go to episode And this now, so it's saying this comparison is, so this is tz info equals t, and this is the import for that. Now let's run it again. Invalid argument for now. Okay, well, so you can't do this. Invalidate if pub data is greater than. Alright, I'm probably going to just look this up and then we'll fix it next time. So I'm going to remove this. And then what do we have here? Because this is a decent time to stop anyway. So yeah, so we basically came and we updated feed parser signatures. Okay, so we're gonna have to make an update, it looks like, to the episode with the whole aware versus not aware thing that we have here. And then we just need to implement these methods. This will be really straightforward to implement, and this is just calling this other thing and passing it back and doing a little packaging. So that'll be really quick. So I'm gonna, before next time, I'm gonna look up that. We'll look up the episode stuff. We'll fix this first, and then we'll package it up, and then we should be able to close that out next time. So that's the plan on that. And let's go git tag app. What are we? 21. Okay, yeah. So yes, we'll leave it there and finish that up next time. So until then, see ya.